Hey folks, we're looking at section 3.2 and I'd like to remind you about something that you learned back in Math 102, and that is completing the square. Before I begin with this, I'd like for you to notice that I have a quadratic function right here. In a moment, I'm going to be referring to A's, B's, and C's, and I want you to understand this is where I'm getting those from. So the A is the leading coefficient there. The B is that middle coefficient and C is the constant. So when I refer to those letters, you'll know where I'm getting those from. So in your notes, if you'll go down, you have a list here, a completing the square how-to list. And step number 1 says that we should divide both sides by A. Now I want to show you that we're going to be doing all of our work here on number 8. The A in number 8 is just simply a negative or a negative 1. If you look down at number 30, the A in number 30 is a 2. But in this case, for number 8, the A is a negative. So the very first thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of that A on both sides. I want to divide both sides by the A. So I'm going to do this by dividing on the left side by negative 1 and on the right side by negative 1. Totally legal because I'm doing the same thing on both sides. So on the left, I have p of x divided by negative 1, no big deal there. And then I want to take each individual term and divide by negative 1. So the first term, negative x squared divided by negative 1, is just simply going to be a positive x squared. The second term, positive 3x divided by negative 1, is going to be a negative 3x. Now, before I finish out with the 10, I'd like to direct your attention up to number 2. And number 2 on your list says that you should move the constant down the line and ignore it temporarily. I'm going to do that here. So I'm just leaving a space, a blank, that will bump my constant down the line. So take your positive 10, divide by negative 1, and it's now a negative 10. There's really not a lot of math involved other than just dividing everything by negative 1 on this step. So now what you're going to do, refer back to your list again. You want to take half of the B term, half of the B term. Your B term is that negative 3x. And really I'm just taking half of the B, not the whole entire B term, just the B. So when you have to take half of negative 3, I know a lot of you want to talk about a 1.5. And that's not the easiest way to do that. And if you want to take half of 3, just call it 3 halves. If you want to take half of 9, call it 9 halves. It makes things a lot easier. So if I take half of the B term, that's going to be 3 halves. And then number 4, you want to square that number. So you want to take 3 halves times 3 halves. And you multiply tops, multiply bottoms, you're going to get 9/4. Now what do you do with that number? You are going to, step number 5, add and subtract it. That's what the blank is for. So we're going to add 9/4 and we're going to subtract 9/4 all at once. Referring back to our list now, after you add and subtract it, you want to factor the trinomial. Factor the trinomial. The trinomial is the piece that's highlighted. Tri meaning 3, there's just 3 terms there. We want to factor that. There is a shortcut to factoring this. I'll go ahead and show it to you. Shortcut is that whatever the variable is, use that. That's always going to be the first thing. Whatever the sign of the original B term was, is going to be the sign that you use here. And the third thing is that, remember how back in step number 3, we used half of the B term? This number right here is always going to be half of the B term. So what you have here is that these 3 terms became this factor squared, and that's the shortcut for doing that. The rest of it is just copied. The negative 9/4 and the negative 10, that's just simply copied. So then next on my list says that you're going to add the leftover constant. So here's where I'm going to combine my like terms. I want to combine a negative 9/4 and a negative 10. In my mind, I'm not going to think of this as a negative 10. I'm going to get common denominators. So I'm going to think of this as a negative 40 over 4. 40 divided by 4 is 10. And now that allows me to combine like terms. Your calculator will do that as well. And so we have a negative 49 fourths. Negative 9 fourths, negative 40 fourths gives me my negative 49 fourths. The very last step on my list says that we should multiply a back to both sides. So that means I need to take my negative 1 and I need to pass it back, first of all, to my quantity, and secondly, over here to that constant. So when I pass it back, I passed it to my quantity first. You'll notice it here in my quantity. Do not distribute. Order of ops will not allow you to distribute. And then I also passed it to my 49 fourths, which used to be negative. Now a negative times a negative is positive. And I have my vertex form at this point. Now I'm ready to go graph it, which we will do in class.